Welcome to the Infidelity Doctor channel. My name is Dr. Talal Salim, and this is the Ask Dr. Talal segment, your place to ask me anything you want to know about affair recovery and affair prevention. Please remember that this segment is not a substitute for the individual and couples counseling you're supposed to be getting. This is merely a place for you to get some basic questions answered and a place for you to learn about my clinical insights when it comes to affair recovery and affair prevention. Before we get to the question of the week, make sure that you like the video and subscribe to the channel so that you can get the most recent updates. Let's get to it. The question of the week is as follows. How do you know if they're telling the truth? What should I look for? I'm assuming this question is pertaining to the unfaithful during the milestones of telling the story. So as I have mentioned before, getting the story of the affair is one of the most important milestones of recovery. This is what's going to help people understand what happened, why it happened, assess the damage, and figure out what's the best way to heal from this. And it is important for people to get this accurate narrative so they can move on to the next milestones of recovery, so that they can actually begin rebuilding their life, regardless of whether they decide to stay together or heal individually. But how do you know if the unfaithful is telling the truth? It's a valid question because infidelity doesn't happen without deceptions. So the credibility of the unfaithful is zero after the discovery because they have been deceptive and not trustworthy as a result of their actions of being unfaithful. And also, we have to accept that even in the situation when there is 24/7 audio and video recording of everything that transpired, that still doesn't give you the truth. Because audio and video only captures, words and interactions, but it doesn't really capture the thoughts and the feelings in the unfaithful heart and head, so to speak. But that doesn't mean we should not try to get the story because the story is difficult to know beyond a shadow of doubt that is 100% accurate. To me, the next best thing is really to set the stage for creating the right environment to collect all the pieces of information that the therapist and the betrayed need to have in order to make sense of the narrative. So before we even talk about the infidelity, the first thing that I do, I ask my clients to give me a lot of history. I ask them to give me the history of their relationship. How did we start? How we got here? And this will help me understand if there is relationship deficit might have contributed to the affair. I also ask about past relationship history that both the betrayed and the partner have had, because sometimes the seeds of infidelity are related to bad experiences in past relationships. And I also ask both partners to tell me a little bit more about their family of origins, the household they grew up in, and some of the major events that have shaped their view about relationships and value of fidelity. Why do I ask for all this context? Because infidelity doesn't happen in a vacuum. We need to get all this context before we talk about the story of the infidelity so that we can measure the story against all this context that we have discovered or uncovered. But once we get to the story, my job as a clinician is to ask very specific questions to help me establish sequence of events, help me identify the unfaithful thoughts, feelings, and motivations behind every progression of the boundary violation that they were involved in, to help me kind of better understand how did this start and how did it progress. I always tell the unfaithful, be prepared that I might call BS on some of the things that doesn't make sense. If something seems to be illogical based on the information that we have collected already, then it is the unfaithful job is to make sure that the story is adding up and making sense. I also invite the betrayed to ask any questions that they want to have or any questions that they have about the story of the infidelity. But my policy on that one, not every question is going to be a good question because there is such a thing as oversharing. So to me, a good question for the betrayed to ask is a question in which the answer is going to help us understand the type of infidelity that took place, why it happened, how it happened. If they're able to make a case for that, then it's a good question to ask. But even then, the level of detail is important to be appropriate so that you don't further traumatize the betrayed partner by having unnecessary images in their head, especially if that level of detail is not really relevant to the essential parts of the what, the how, and the why. And, when we get the narrative of the infidelity from the unfaithful, we put it to the test of logic, of does it add up with the history that we have collected before? Does it add up with what we know about the unfaithful origins? And does it add up with what was shared by both partners about the history of the relationship? As well as, does it add up with the evidence that was discovered? And this takes us back full circle to the value of the evidence that the betrayed have discovered that led them to believe that there is infidelity. Yes, it's an important data to test the story against, but also you cannot build the story 100% exclusively on what was discovered. Give you classic examples. Sometimes, you have the betrayed who discover a text between the unfaithful and the third party in which the unfaithful told the third party that they are in love with them. Now, if you go based on that, you can make a case for an emotional affair. But if you dig deeper, sometimes you find out that the unfaithful didn't really have those true emotional attachment toward the third party, but they felt that they needed to say that so that they can get the other things that they want from them, such as the sexual aspect of the relationships. And that's what I'm saying, is that just going strictly based on what was discovered by itself is not adequate. You need that with the history as well as asking the right questions. So hopefully this answers the question of the week. Feel free to leave your thoughts about the answer you heard today in the comment section below, as well as your suggestions for the questions that you'd like to see me tackle in the future. Until then, be well, be safe, and embrace the possibility for a brighter future. Take care.